One mod that all of you watching right now should download is the Quick Slot and Consumables bug fix. After patch 2.1, a couple of new bugs were introduced into Cyberpunk 2077, one of which being this consumables bug. So now if you use a bunch of the miscellaneous consumable items like food or drink before a fight, it'll very likely unequip or even change your equipped Quick Slot items, notably the healing items, grenades, and cyberware in these quick use slots. For me, it added glasses as a healing item. I was honestly somewhat hopeful this would allow me to take off my glasses in epic fashion, but no such luck. But thankfully this mod will fix that, allowing you to use consumables with your quick slot items remaining in place. And you probably should, as many of these limited time consumables are incredibly strong, especially before big fights. Patch 2.1 unfortunately came with a few broken features, but thankfully modders have been rectifying many of these problems. And even earlier today, CDPR announced that a new update will be coming next week. One of the biggest of these mods is Sonic Shock Prevents Trace, allowing you to once again be a full-on stealthy netrunner. But from the same mod author, we also just recently got Trace Position Overhaul, which I think quite a few of you are going to really like. As you know, by default in Cyberpunk 2077, just uploading a quick hack to an enemy will begin a trace on your location. Uploading more will make the trace complete faster, but with this mod, it'll fundamentally change when that occurs. Now, only some enemies, and you'll be able to see this by scanning them, will have the tracing ice. So here you can see among these 6th Street members, the recruits cannot trace me. I can freely quick hack them without any consequence. But some of the higher tier comrades in the group are able to trace me, and I would need to use Sonic Shock or Memory Wipe to avoid that trace then. And this mod will give netrunners a huge buff as well. Now enemies that do have the netrunning ability will be able to protect their entire network. So any enemies nearby will have the ability to trace you. And I would say overall, this actually provides a pretty cool opportunity for strategy. Locate and focus down some of the netrunners, and you'll be able to quick hack freely for the rest of the group. And a similar effect will apply to boss tier enemies who will be more easily able to track you down as you quick hack them. And to me, this is overall just a huge improvement for how netrunning works in Cyberpunk. The inability to be a true stealth netrunner in the base game is just pretty rough at points, but I feel like this mod strikes a nice balance of giving you way more opportunities to be stealthy while netrunning, but not making it completely overpowered like it obviously can be. But over the last few weeks, mods for Cyberpunk 2077 have been really making a comeback. Tons of the mods once broken by patch 2.0 were finally updated. Many of these getting new features, but we've also just been getting a healthy number of mods overhauling gameplay systems, because we've now hit a point where mod authors had a few months to dive into some of the major 2.0 changes and make their own edits on top of those. And particularly with some of these bigger mod updates, I'm sure a lot of you missed them. Mod updates don't go to the homepage of Nexus. But that in mind, one of the first mods you need to take a look at is Average Hacker's Lazy Rebuild. This is going to be a modern remake of the Amateur Hackers mod from Scissors. The mod was never updated for patch 2.0, but this new version, when going into combat, all enemies that are tier 2 and above will be able to quick hack you. When it's just a tier 2 enemy, this will largely just be basic control quick hacks, so you'll be doing things like rebooting your optics or glitching out some of your weapons momentarily. But even beyond that, some of the tier 3 enemies will also have quick hack options and have even more powerful quick hacks they can upload to you. I like this mod, and I really liked Amateur Hackers before because it makes quick hacking a far more common occurrence in combat. We get to quick hack people all the time. I'm sure many of you actually base your entire builds around that, and it really just feels fair that enemies get a fair amount of usage from this as well. But if you are looking to overhaul enemies in a more meaningful way, Enemies of Night City is probably the single best mod to do this for the game. Its new version supporting 2.0 was just released, bringing a ton of other changes to the mod overall. If you've never played with the original release, Enemies of Night City would do what the name suggests: overhaul almost all of the enemies in Night City. Some of their combat senses were enhanced so they could pose a larger threat in battle, but most notably, many of the enemies simply had abilities now. They'll use healing items on themselves, they'll leap at you, dash at you, and even have the ability to challenge you in your own slowed time. And some of the bosses of Night City even got broader overhauls. So this mod just made combat across the board way more dynamic, and different factions truly felt distinct because they had different and distinct abilities. And with these more recent updates, things have gone even further. Now overall in Night City, you're going to find far more enemy diversity. There's going to be a greater distribution of elite units, netrunners, and even techies, and all of these enemies will be a bit smarter thanks to some of the AI upgrades this is implementing. Enemies actually have eyes now. They'll be far better at detecting you from afar, and it's just a bit more human-like, like they could actually see what's in front of them, even if it is 20, 30, 40 feet away. And and melee enemies specifically will have access to completely new movesets and animations that they can use while they're attacking you. Upon finding a body, enemies will now call for backup, so their comrades will come over to check things out, and they'll kind of all group together a little bit. You'll notice in combat, enemies will use things like suppressive fire to try and pin you down, as some others may flank you, and they'll also be a bit more aggressive with their grenade usage to try and actually get you to move from whatever cover you're nearby. But perhaps coolest of all, enemies with tech weapons can now properly shoot you through cover, just like we can. But of course, there's also going to just be a ton of new abilities that enemies will have access to. The animals have a pretty cool new feature where they can consume a chem to block damage over time attacks like a contagion or overheat, and some will even have access to and be able to use berserk of their own against you. You'll see them go through the animation of charging themselves up, and this completely levels the playing field, with these enemies often dealing tons more damage after activating berserk. And to make things even more brutal, some elite tier netrunners can now reflect quick hacks back on you as you try to hack them. These are just a couple of examples of some of the new abilities added with this most recent update, but there are a ton of other abilities distributed throughout the enemy's leveled list, so you'll almost always be encountering something new or unique, especially early on into your playthrough. But one of the other major aspects of this latest overhaul are some of the boss upgrades. Many of the bosses in Night City will be overhauled into more unique and tougher fights with this mod. So bosses will feature totally new movesets and abilities, but also quite notably new and improved breach protocols that are going to be way more difficult to complete, but if you do complete them, your bonuses will be even larger. The biggest of these overhauls came to Atom Smasher, and believe me, this boss fight is now absolute chaos and a truly difficult battle. Honestly, I don't want to spoil too much, as half the fun of this mod is just downloading it and experiencing it. The entire combat dynamic in Cyberpunk just becomes a bit more interesting, with enemies whipping out new abilities on you, and in turn, you having to adapt your build to them. But one of the big mods to finally get its update in Overhaul 4.2.0 was Wannabe Edge Runner, and I think this one complements the new 2.0 version of Cyberpunk perfectly. Wannabe Edge Runner will add in full-fledged Cyberpsychosis to Cyberpunk 2077. So now, based on how much cyberware you equip, you'll have a new humanity stat. This will be set for your character, and this was nicely updated to work with the new 2.0 cyberware changes. So visually it looks great, but also it just functions appropriately with the overhauled cyberware system. And as you can imagine, this humanity stat is what's going to determine if you enter into Cyberpsychosis or not. And it'll fluctuate based on your actions. Each enemy you take down will drop your humanity a bit. Gangers and corpos will barely move the meter, but take out too many cops or civvies and you'll start to notice your humanity dropping more quickly. So one of the cool parts about some of the more recent updates are there are even more ways to counteract your drop in humanity. So now all of your apartment activities like showering, playing with pets, or even just making some coffee will increase your humanity, while sleeping will outright reset the value, basically giving you the opportunity to start each day anew. And you even have these new neuro blockers added as a chem that will temporarily block any and all psychosis. So kind of just a temporary use, get out of jail free card to not deal with this system at all. Although you probably want to deal with this system, because if you do continue to play and have your humanity drop, things will happen. So first up, you'll enter into a state of low humanity with some on-screen effects. For most players, this is the time to either start restoring humanity or get ready because the real you is about to come out, because while you're in low humanity, there's a chance to enter full-scale cyberpsychosis. By default, it's around a 10% chance, but everything about this mod is highly configurable, and you could also make it so when your humanity reaches 0, you immediately enter cyberpsychosis. And with this 2.0 overhaul, the visuals and sounds for going cyber psycho were upgraded, and now it just really feels like a transformative experience. And once you're here, a few things will happen. You're going to get a wanted level by default. You can configure how much this is. I actually really like making it so max tack will immediately respond, but your character will also be way buffed up. You'll have more move speed, armor, and health regen, and really while playing, you just feel like a god, being stronger, faster, and even having better use of your weapons. And you can definitely try to use Cyberpsychosis strategically, just triggering it right as you get into a bigger fight or boss battle. But this more recent update also brought some totally new consequences to Cyberpsychosis. If you survive everything it has to offer, it'll eventually wear off and you'll immediately be teleported to somewhere random. You'll awake in another part of Night City with the post-psychosis debuff added to you. So now instead of being buffed up, you'll have debuffs to many of your combat skills and cyberware usage is blocked. This just until your next rest, but it's a result of your cyberware temporarily taking over your body. And I gotta say, with this updated 2.0 implementation, Wannabe Edge Runner has really just been taken to a completely new level. It just feels right in Cyberpunk now. One of the big bonuses of of this one is it got me organically using some of the facilities in my apartments. It's one of the first mods that got me regularly visiting to sleep or just make some coffee or take a shower to get my humanity in check. But even further, it is just kind of nice to have this X factor in the background where you can drop into becoming a full-on cyber psycho at points. But as I am sure many of you have discovered after the release of patch 2.0, fighting against and just running from the police in Night City is also incredibly fun. And if you want to make this even a bit more interesting, Law Enforcement Overhaul is the mod for you. This will change up the typical NCPD responses in Night City, but also add in a variety of responses from other concerned factions. So when it comes to the NCPD, you'll notice some new responses to your wanted level. After a few stars, you'll get these heavier NCPD cruisers with better equipped enemies. Typically they'll have SMGs and a bit more armor, almost like a new half-step. They're definitely stronger than street cops, but not quite a full-on SWAT response. But even further, if you do have several stars, you are effectively an all-hands-on-deck threat, and now that'll be reflected. At a couple of stars, unmarked vehicles that contain detectives will show up, and from an immersive standpoint, this really does feel quite fitting, but far more threatening are the Netwatch agents who will now appear at 4 stars and up. These guys will come in armored cars and of course start quick hacking you almost immediately. And this becomes particularly devastating when you consider that you basically have an endless swarm of cops around you, so it is far more difficult to find that specific netrunner that is currently uploading a quick hack. And you can even sometimes get these gigantic Militech behemoths that will roll in with their own SWAT teams that'll attempt to take you down with the help of MaxTac. And even MaxTac gets some changes, as now they can appear in their own weaponized vehicles in addition to some of the dropships. In a similar vein, you'll also be able to find a range of new unit types coming from Militech in the Badlands. At 5 stars, now they can spawn with some missile trucks to absolutely destroy you, and of course this will also apply to the Barghest in Dogtown. Barghest in particular will get a focus on mech usage with this mod. So as you get wanted in Dogtown, you'll notice far more mechs responding to the call and attempting to take you down, and to me this just makes sense. It feels really on par with this faction and their location, and overall this increased unit diversity from all of the major law enforcement responses is a really nice change from this mod. It makes the police interactions just feel a lot more fresh. But that really is only half of what this mod has to offer, as in addition there are going to be several new police responses in certain locations. So if you commit some minor crimes out in the rich North Oak areas, you'll get private security responding at early wanted levels. Out in the Biotechnica Flats, Biotechnica troops will now respond at low levels. You'll see some fairly basic corporate security early on, but as you increase your wanted level, Arasaka will come to assist with some heavier units. And out near the edge of Night City, you'll get Border Patrol after you if you cause too much havoc, but if you up your wanted level high enough, you'll even get NUSA responses with some Black Ops agents that will try and put you down very quickly. And a bunch more. The entire map of Night City had its police responses redefined with this mod. And overall, I think this mod is an easy download for many of you. It simply makes your encounters and interactions with the police response across Night City more varied and notable. And it's definitely one of those mods that really ups the fun factor of running from and interacting with the police. But another mod that was finally updated was the car modification shop. This one got updated for 2.0 quite rapidly, but we only just saw its 2.1 update drop a few weeks ago. 2.1 was the big one, as this added in a bunch of new cars, and of course these cars can now be modified to your heart's content and become perfect options for escaping all of these new police additions. But sometimes running from the police at high speeds can get lonely, so another great new mod to add is the passenger. This will make it so when you're out driving on your lonesome, Johnny Silverhand will manifest in the passenger seat to hang out with you. So now unfortunately, the second combat begins, Johnny will despawn, so no police chases with Johnny unless they're out of sight of you, but he will be there for the moments before and in between combat, and while it's a pretty small mod, it also is just kind of nice to have someone with you sometimes, and this is pretty lore friendly. But another mod that's going to be an absolute game changer for those of you who are modding often is the Archive Conflict Checker tool. This tool will allow you to check your install mods for conflicts between one another. So if two mods are impacting the same file and in turn breaking one another, you'll be able to easily see and detect that. Here I have a simple example with Deceptious Quest Core and the Passenger. Of course, these mods are meant to be working together, that's why a conflict is popping up, but if they weren't, this tool would give me a clear indication of why my game is potentially having some problems. But with that in mind, these are 10 of the best new mods to download for Cyberpunk 2077 right now, and if you're interested in more, check out this video where I highlight the best mods to release for this game in 2023 overall.